So, in order to now wrap up our workflow chapter, we will just have a look at a very small example of how to bring in a C# script and define like a very simple piece of functionality on our UI. And then we will bring it all together and actually have our first real runtime UI in the game view. But that will be just very quickly, just to kind of have this complete workflow overview, how it basically works. And then the rest of this course basically will be a much deeper dive into much more complicated C# scripts and what you can do with them. So when we now jump back into Unity, I'm having a brand new project here prepared. Again, nothing fancy here, all stuff that we already did. In our hierarchy, we only have a container and a button. Now this button has a tiny style sheet attached to it, or rather by selector, a couple of styles attached to it. And that's it, nothing more. And now we want to bring in the third component, which is a piece of functionality to this button. And the way we do this is we go into our project folder here and we create a C# script. Let's, for example, call this button screen. And let's just open this in our code editor. Now, if it's not opening immediately, just find it in your Solution Explorer here. This is how I called the folder, Scripting Primer. You can call this obviously however you want to. And now this is our first real C# script that we are touching. Since we are not going to do a lot here, I think we can work with those two windows next to each other so that we see our actual element names here. Later we probably need more space in the code editor. So now what I'm going to do here right now, I don't want you to actually remember all of this, so it's not really important that you learn all of this yet. This is just going to be the most simple example that you can provide. We are going to go over all of this code probably at least 10 more times later in the course. So don't worry about that. Let's just see one little example how this could work. So the first thing that we need is to import the actual UI toolkit library. We go UI engine.UI elements. Oops, again, my nice German characters. And we can get rid of all of this mono behavior boilerplate. What we will use is the onEnable method. Now I'm going to paste in two pieces of code here. Now, the first thing that we have to do, this is code that we will write about 100 times in this course, and this is basically just a way to connect your script to your actual UI files, basically. So at this root element is basically where we will append our visual tree. But don't worry about that. You don't have to understand that at all for now. And this is generally more some sort of boilerplate code that you don't really need to go very deep on that. You just have to kind of put that in so that you connect all your pieces. But this is not a main part at what you will have to work, because once that is set up, basically once you can then just use your elements. And now the second piece of code that we are going to paste in is now some actual will now actually have some effect. Unfortunately, this is a little bit too small here. Let's just drag this a little wider. And now what we are doing here, we are getting our button. Again, don't focus on how this is actually done. We are going to cover this extensively. And we are basically setting some event on the button. And what this is just a complicated way to say whenever you press the button, what we want to do is we want to change the background color of this button. So again, for now we don't care like how this is technically happening. The only thing that we have to take away is that if that works, we have set a little piece of functionality on our button, and that functionality is that its background color should change to some yellow. And that is sort of the most simple piece of functionality that you could provide in a C# script. And by that, we basically now covered a small little example for this piece in our workflow diagram. And so the only thing that's left to do now is to actually hook this up, bring all those files together, and make this running in the actual game view. So for that, we are going back to our Unity editor and our scripting file. Now let's just make this a little bit smaller. Let's make the Unity editor a little bit bigger. And now for the first time, we are going to leave UI Builder. We are going to look at our scene here. Now, just to keep this together in one project, I will just create a new scene. Now let's call this button scene. Let's open the button scene. And now I will add one game object. Let's call this UI. And this is now just, again, some boilerplate thing that you have to do to connect your UI to your actual stuff that is happening in Unity, to your actual scene. And for that, I'm choosing this game object. Now, remember, we moved this inspector, this actual Unity inspector down there. So it's kind of hidden now. Let's bring it back again. I normally have my inspector here on the right-hand side. And now what we need to do is we need to add a component to this game object, which is a UI document. And this UI document is now complaining that it doesn't have a panel settings asset. So we have to create that. Let's go to UI Toolkit, panel settings asset. Now, again, don't ask what that actually is, what that does. Just create this asset. Go back to our game object. Now we can choose this panel, and that is basically it. Now this panel is set up. You don't really have to understand what is happening here to set this up. And now the only thing that is left to do is to actually choose some UXML file that is defining our layout. And we do that here by choosing mine was called, so you can see here, scripting test. So I'm choosing this. And now when we go to the game view, you can see already our layout is basically appearing in the game view. Now, we didn't attach the script to this game object yet. So when I press the play button, the scene is running, but nothing happens, obviously, when I press the button. So let's leave play mode again. Let's just make sure that we actually saved our script. And now we will attach the script to this game object. We call this button screen. Now the script is attached. And now when we press the play button and press our button in our UI, now you can see we actually made something, and our button is beautifully yellowish. And that is exactly what we set in our script. Yes, and that is basically it. And so with that, we now have basically seen a whole example of your normal Unity workflow. We have made our layout structure and our styling in the UI Builder. We added some functionality with a C# script, and we connected all of those things in the scene with this special UI document component and those panel assets that you don't have to worry about for now. But this was basically a whole running example of a small little game UI that actually is working. Now, the last step technically would be to, I don't know, to export this thing and then have a real executable Unity game out of this. We will have a brief look at this for one of our projects, but this is definitely not the focus of this course. What we will focus on now is to actually see what things and features we can build with, mostly with scripting and with basically using all of those tools that UI Toolkit is giving us. So thank you so far, and I hope I will see you in the next chapter.